Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. So it's been a few weeks now since the horrible landmark decision in the federal court to allow a biological man that identifies as being a woman to actually win in a court of law, a federal court of law in Australia. And well, unfortunately, Sal Grover, at the forefront of all this, had to face the horrific decision from a judge that said that sex is definitely changeable when we know it's not. Judge really set a dangerous precedent for the likes of real women everywhere in Australia. And unfortunately, Australia, the court system is done. It's dead. If you go in a court of law that sex is changeable, it's not going to work for you anymore. It's no longer black and white now. It's now in the gray, which therefore means that the court of law no longer works the way it's supposed to work. If you deny basic reality, basic fact, and basic biology, you can't have a functioning law system. If you've got a biological man that identifies as being a woman that can beat an actual biological woman in a court of law, win $10,000 and make the woman pay for that man's, legal fees as well for taking that woman to court, you've got a significant problem on your hands. Seems like the judge as well has been captured by this woke ideology because according to the law, the Australian law that was changed under Julia Gillard, who happens to be a biological woman, but doesn't seem to care too much about real women at all. So because of all that, the judge has sided with the biological man for the case of gender identity. And somehow gender identity is more important these days than biological reality and biological fact. To me, that just seems crazy, doesn't it? But nevertheless, Australia has become a very dangerous place for the likes of real women everywhere. But yet, the politicians would love to get up and say that domestic violence and domestic abuse is happening everywhere and we need to be very much aware of it. Sure, but what is a woman? Because if a man that identifies as being a woman can be a woman, you've got a significant problem on your hands, haven't you? But they don't see it as that. So it's only good for virtue signaling 1 minute, but the next, we don't care about women at all. We don't care about women's rights. We don't care about women's spaces. We don't care about any of that. All we seem to care about is what the man identifying as being a woman wants because we're afraid of discrimination. It's not discrimination or hateful to say the truth, but they want you to believe that it is, in fact, hateful and discrimination to say the truth. Unbelievable. We live in a topsy-turvy kind of world, don't we? So I saw this article from Sky News, and I thought it was a good article because they're releasing the consequences post the Tickle versus Giggle transgender judgment, and the consequences I have actually stated are rather dire and rather concerning. So we all should be men too. We all should be in protection or trying to protect the likes of real women everywhere. We shouldn't be in favor of what this judge says, but if the people had a say about this, it would have been a very different story. But because a judge, who by the way has 4 kids, and a wife, seemingly saying sex is changeable, so that means your wife can change her sex if she wants to, because you said so and you bound down the hammer. That's it. So the law says so. I'm going to go in favor of the law. You spineless coward. That's exactly what you are. And I was being generous by saying spineless, by the way. So Sal Grover goes, based on what this article says, if the question were put to the Australian people, no doubt it would return a different answer than the courts. Thus, the Tickle versus Giggle judgment, with ramifications affecting so many aspects of everyday life, cannot be allowed to hinge on the opinion of a single judge. I love that. Why is the verdict for something that can happen and affect every single woman in Australia, why is it handed down by a biological male judge that is pandering to a woke ideology and making it very difficult for the likes of an actual woman to win a case in a court of law? I wonder. So this is Insights and Analysis from Rocco. No idea how to say his last name, so I don't want to butcher it. A federal court judge's ruling that sex is changeable is part of an all-out assault on the rights of females, an outcome ironically pushed and celebrated by women themselves. Yes, the feminists, modern feminists these days, don't really understand the ramifications of what they are celebrating. Last week, transgender person Roxanne Tickle won Roxanne's claim in the federal court of unlawful discrimination after being banned from a women's only dating app, or women's only app. In the Tickle vs. Giggle case, federal court justice Robert Bromwich ruled Sal Grover and her Giggle for Girls app had indirectly discriminated against Tickle. Indirectly, not directly, but indirectly, by kicking Tickle off the app. Tickle, born male, who underwent a surgical sex change in 2019, claimed that Tickle was discriminated against by Giggle and Grover on the basis of Tickle's being a transgender rather than biological woman. So that statement as a whole is problematic. On the basis of Tickle being transgender rather than a biological woman. So what's more important? Transgender. The effect of the judgment is that the burning question of what is a woman for the purposes of the law is to be answered if someone identifies as a woman. In fact, he declared that according to the law, sex is changeable. Thanks to good old Julia Gillard, that is, who is a woman. So a woman changed the law to suit men that identify as being women. How about that? Well done, Julia. The judgment criticized across the world means that gender identity is superior to biological sex when it comes to discriminating against individuals in sex-segregated spaces. This includes the notion that a person's gender is a matter of personal preference, as fashionably changeable as a suit of clothes or a pair of underwear, and not a product of biology and nature, which is unchangeable. The question is, how could this come about? Anti-discrimination laws across Australia have been amended to protect a person's gender identity alongside or as demonstrated by the Tickle vs. Giggle judgment in place of their biological sex. As explained by Patrick Vine in his book Transgender, One Shade of Grey, again, we're in the grey at the moment, the objective of the Commonwealth Sex Discrimination Act 1984, when introduced, was to eliminate discrimination against women, for example, in the workplaces. This discrimination arose because of their biological sex, not because of their dress, mannerisms, or social characteristics. Accordingly, the act included biological definitions of man and woman. But we don't have that nowadays, do we? Consequently, domestic violence support services, women's only gyms and sessions in swimming pools were recognized by the courts as non-discriminatory under special measures intended to achieve equality. In 2013, the act was amended by removing the definitions of man and woman and giving protected status to gender identity, which is defined as the gender-related identity, appearance, or mannerisms of other gender-related characteristics of a person, whether by of medical intervention or not, with or without regard to the person's designated sex at birth. That is a mouthful. What does it mean exactly? Women don't have any rights at all. We don't know what a woman is anymore. That doesn't matter. But in fact, the man that chooses to identify as being a woman, that matters seemingly more, because that man that identifies as being a woman is so much more of a woman than that of a real biological woman. That's effectively what that thing says. The explanatory memorandum to the amending bill stated that its intention was to ensure that transgender women, they're not real women, were not excluded from accessing protections from discrimination on the basis of other attributes in the sex discrimination amendments. The bill was introduced under the watch and with the support of then Prime Minister, you guessed it, Julia Stupid Gillard. Yes, the same Julia Stupid Gillard, the dingbat who was celebrated by the sisterhood for her misogyny speech, oversaw the apparatus by which women's rights in Australia have been destroyed. So who's really the misogynist here? And in doing so, she has or had the sisterhood right behind her. So well done, feminists. Well done. You've only got yourselves to blame. And men too. Male feminists. Oh boy, those are the worst. Consultation and advocacy on the changes to the Act were led by the Australian Human Rights Commission, then President Catherine Branson. Guess who? Another woman making way for biological men. How about that? Described by the Australian Women's Lawyers as Active Citizens website as a trailblazer for women in the law. Ah, yeah, right. Another human rights commissioner at the time, Bethany Hender, another woman, works for the Women's Legal Centre in Canberra. Her profile page on the centre's website boasts that she brings a strong focus on using the legal process to ensure women can assert their rights and obtain redress. Yeah, right. Moreover, the judgment in this case has been celebrated by the present Sex Discrimination Commissioner, Anna Cody. All women. Does this shock you or surprise you? Anyone? In fact, during hearings in the case, Justice Bromwich asked the Sex Discrimination Commissioner to be a friend of the court. And in that capacity, her barrister claimed that sex is not a binary concept, and it is not exclusively a biological concept, thus laying bare the extent of the assault on women's rights by women themselves. Yeah. Well done, women. These women especially, my goodness me. This is the same sisterhood that states there is an epidemic of violence against women in Australia. Okay, what is a woman? Labor ministers Katie Gallagher and Amanda Rishworth formulated about the shame of violence against women and children. While there may very well be an urgent need for women's only services on this score, the Tickle vs. Giggle judgment effectively cancels women's only spaces. The consequences of this are dire. As parliaments and courts retreat from biological reality, men who adopt the Shania Twain approach, man, I feel like a woman, can proportionately now claim the same rights, protections, and access to services and spaces previously only given to biological women. Already we have seen male sex offenders claim to be women and sent to women's prisons, and we've seen what's happened after that. WA Liberal MLC Nick Gorian, in a parliamentary examination into corrective services, found that at least one biological male young person is being detained with juvenile females in that state. Gender self-ID legislation enforced in Australia states means a person no longer needs surgical intervention and instead will be able to legally claim another gender for themselves after a doctor has signed a form. Imagine your daughter, sisters, and friends in their sports clubs working hard and excelling only to face certain defeat when pitted against biological males and having to share change rooms with them. As Terry Barnes noted in The Spectator UK, it must be right that questions can be raised only over any natural hormonal or chromosomal advantage athletes may or may not have. Indeed, Tickle's post-judgment statement referring to this person as a woman's hockey team implies just that. It is to English novelist Charles Dickens that we owe that saying, the law is an arse. Yeah, certainly is. He was right. When it comes to Australian law, thanks in no small part to the sisterhood, the definition of a woman has fallen out of line with public expectation. If the question were to be put to the Australian people, no doubt it would return a different answer than the courts. I hope so. Thus, the Tickle vs. Gill judgment, with ramifications acting so many aspects of everyday life, cannot be allowed to hinge on the opinions of a single judge. So this person, Dr. Rocco, is a legal academic writer and translator, and he obviously seems rather knowledgeable on this matter. So what does that mean for future generations of women everywhere in Australia? God only knows. But if we really want to help women out, we need to voice our concerns, especially right now. So that's exactly what I'm doing by making this video, because I'm sick of it, and I'm sure every single woman out there that has an ounce of common sense about her is sick of it too. Anyway, my friends, you guys take care. You be blessed, and I'll see you all in the next video.